Hello guys, and let's start this video with a provocative, or better to say thought-provocative question. How do you think which of the world armies do Russian people fear the most? I know some of you will say the Ukrainian army, but I will answer no, because it is obvious Russians are afraid of the Russian army. And all because the way they treat their own people. Those regions of the Russian Federation that are now a war zone, and we have to be realistic, many of them on the border with Ukraine are a war zone, tasted their own medicine and, most importantly, the behavior, crimes of their own soldiers. And that is why lots and lots of people in Kursk go out on protests, because they are afraid of the future Russian and North Korean counteroffensive, and they realize that the only tactics that Russian army is good at is, yes, scorched earth policy, and nobody wants that, but Russia will keep liberating Russia. Actually, recently they have targeted their own house in Belgorod with their own Russian and Iranian Shahed drone, and could not say it was air defense because video cameras fixed everything. And as a bonus, special military operation of the Ukrainian drones in Belgorod tonight, -1 oil refinery. So let's discuss all of that, what is happening in Russia, in their war zone. Something that seemed totally unbelievable at the start of Putin's blitzkrieg, and something that is already the new reality of 10 Russian regions. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see Russia defeated and even those poor Russians liberated from the Russian army, subscribe. We will discuss that as the Ukrainian armed forces demilitarize the evil empire. And perhaps let's start with the special military operation of the Ukrainian drones. Last night they visited another oil refinery in Belgorod, and the governor of the region had to report about explosions and the destruction of reservoirs. You might have noticed that these bordering with Ukraine regions have lots of oil refineries because they are super needed, and not just for the export but also for the logistics and Russian army in general. That's why every destroyed oil refinery close to the front lines means more problems for the Russian logistics, more delays and more pressures on the troops on the ground. Hopefully more drones will visit and mark Russian oil refineries with severe detonations. But Russians are good at that themselves, and on the 5th of November, it was all over Russian publics. They have targeted an apartment building with a Russian drone. And unfortunately, they have cameras all around, and it was impossible to say this was Ukraine or an air defense working. It was obvious the drone is the Shahed drone, the ones that they send like crazy in the direction of all Ukrainian cities, but somehow it lost its way and ended up destroying 40 flats in Belgorod. No victims among the people, but 40 flats, that is a lot, and 24 cars. So we may say that in times when our allies still do not let Ukraine strike back, Russia strikes itself. Well, way to go. But what is more interesting, more and more Russians are afraid not of the bombs that Russian army drops on their own lands, not of the drones that they target in their own apartment buildings, but of the Russian soldiers. And this actually tells a lot about the country and its attitude to human life in general. Subscribe to demonstrate your solidarity with Ukraine and our soldiers that follow the rules of war and treat people who caused lots of bad, who keep destroying our lives, who invaded us, still according to the rules of war, Geneva Convention and whatnot. But you cannot say it about Russians in Ukraine, and you cannot say it about Russian soldiers to Russian people in Russia. These days, Russia has mounted lots and lots of soldiers in Kursk region. They desperately want to liberate the territory before the inauguration of the Donald Trump. So if any negotiations happen, they want to start with a strong position. And when you claim that you are the strongest army in the world and you do not control your borders and you have Ukrainian soldiers controlling settlements in one of your regions, you don't feel very strong. That's why desperate Putin, who is afraid to conscript new people, had to ask Kim Jong-un to sell him some North Korean soldiers. And I'm using the word sell because I feel very, very, very sorry for these people from the North Korea. First of all, because they were born under such dictatorship, and second, because they were definitely sacrificed. Nothing good will come out of this unless they escape and finally see what is internet, and not only because can you imagine how many discoveries a person has that did not know about the existence on the internet until it traveled to the front lines in Ukraine. Insane. But they have amassed 50,000 soldiers in Kursk because they will try to liberate this region, and more Russians go out on protests because they don't want this kind of liberation. Russia tries to hide the information about their internally relocated people, internal refugees, because this will definitely show the failure of Putin's plans. And they don't give these people the necessary help. They do not provide them any psychological support. Ukrainian soldiers do. And after weeks of the so-called occupation of these villages, many Russian people actually say, we don't mind. And soldiers that come from Russia, deep inside Russia, they treat them worse than the Ukrainian soldiers who are not acting like criminals. What is more interesting, these protests are gathering in Kursk, which is the capital of the war-torn Russian region. And they know that Russia will keep dropping bombs on their lands as they do. And that's the only tactics that Russia applies. It's not about creativity, innovation, or strategy of war. It's simply about dropping as many bombs as you can on a very small territory so that everything is erased. And actually, when they speak about the Ukrainian cities that they managed to occupy, these are not cities anymore. These are not streets. These are not schools or hospitals. These are ashes. You can have a look from the satellite view. And this is what they are preparing to do in Kursk to their own people. Ukrainian soldiers never do like that. Have a look at the liberated Kherson. Yesterday we celebrated the second anniversary of this very important Ukrainian victory, and Kherson is okay. Russians keep hunting people with drones there, but Ukrainians cared about the liberation of city, the preservation of lives, buildings, everything, cultural heritage. And now this poor people of the Kursk region are terrified what their own soldiers will do to their streets, homes, and villages. That is insane, but this also tells a lot about the attitude to human life in Russia. If they don't care about their own people, how can you hope they will care about anyone else? What is also interesting, more and more Chechen soldiers, which belong to the Chechen National Republic within the Russian Federation and who were actively involved in this war, start reporting about the war crimes, surprise, of the Russian soldiers. They say that lots of shops, lots of flats are looted in Kursk region where there were no Ukrainian soldiers. So Russian soldiers were sent to protect these territories from the further advances of the Ukrainian army, and instead of protecting, they started looting their own people. And Russians on that land shout about that, but the classical Putin's behavior is to hide the information about the people who go out on these protests, about the people who had to relocate because their regions are torn by war. And why is it so? Because Putin invaded Ukraine and people supported him in 2014, in 2022. They chose to pretend nothing is happening because nothing was happening in their homes. It was happening to us. And now, because of this choice, they have war in Belgorod, in Kursk, in Voronezh, in Lipetsk, in Rostov, in Volgograd, in Krasnodar, and we may say in Bashkortostan, in Chechnya, because Ukrainian drones reach far away. And it always happens like that when you start a war against the nation that values freedom more than anything else in this world. And if you have read the Ukrainian history, if you know any Ukrainians, you feel that freedom is as necessary for our lives as oxygen. And I'm proud of that. And honestly, I am proud of Ukrainian soldiers that even on the territory of the enemy behave themselves much better than those enemies who protect their own people. This is crazy, but this is another proof that you can never negotiate with Russia, with Russian army, with ruler Putin, because there are no values you can ground your negotiations on. It's all about hate, it's all about greed, and it's all about fear. Fear of losing authoritarian power. Because democracies on the border with Russia seem deadly to Putin. And you know, one of the reasons why I'm sure we will win in this war is because Putin and people who support him, they are definitely in the past. They are not about future. They are not about creativity, innovation, ambition, anything else. They are about past. They think they can recreate the Soviet Union, but it is impossible in the 21st century. And together we will demonstrate how such evil empires collapse. It would have been better if the Russian Empire collapsed in the 18th or 19th century when it was a global tendency. But okay, they managed to live until the 21st, but they will not go further. And I know you know that deep inside your heart. So keep supporting Ukraine, keep standing with us, and keep watching how this evil empire collapses. Join me on X, Threads, Discord, and Instagram. All the links that you need are in the description of this video. Check our merch shop for lots of good items that work well as reminders and conversation starters about Ukraine. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel. But most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!